Good afternoon, everyone. Andy Jacob here with the DotCom Magazine Entrepreneur Spotlight Series. We have a very special guest on the show today. I'm very excited about this, and you will be too when you find out that we've got Mr. Vivien Garnès, the co-founder and co-CEO of one of the most powerful startups out there called Upfluence, which is an all-in-one influencer platform. They're a venture-backed company. Vivien is one of the leading experts in influencer platforms and how influencers can influence the entire world, can influence your brand, and what influencers can do to help power the company that wants to be known worldwide throughout the social platforms. Vivien, it's very exciting to have you on the show today.
Thanks for having me. That's one hell of an intro.
Oh, well, we're very excited to have you, Vivien. Let's pull the lens back to 30,000 feet. There's so much to talk about since I'm able to have you on the show today. Let's pull the lens back on Upfluence and tell people what you do with this all-in-one influencer platform.
Absolutely. So in a nutshell, we're a technology company. And what we do is that we help brands on one hand, and we help agencies, marketing agencies on the other. We help them scale their influencer marketing program, right? So there's a lot to it. How do you identify influencers successfully? How do you activate them? How do you reach out to them? How do you manage them, especially at scale when you have very large volumes of them working with you? How to pay them and incentivize them for your campaigns, and how do you monitor their performance, essentially? So we've built all of this into one software, one platform, and it's been a pretty exciting ride.
That's a great ride. Now, Vivien, let's pull it back even a little bit further. Let's start from ground zero, because we, besides having people that have venture-backed companies and Inc. 5000 companies and Fortune 500 companies that watch the show, we also have younger entrepreneurs that are just starting out. So let's sort of explain just a little bit what an influencer does and what they can do for somebody's new company, as well as mature Fortune 500 company.
Yeah. So the simplest way to approach this is to imagine a social media user with an audience, with a readership, with followers, essentially, right? So technically, you and I, if you have, 100 followers on Twitter, you're an influencer to a degree, right? Meaning you will influence your inner circle. I forgot who to credit here, but one definition that I like that differentiates celebrities from influencers is if you knew someone without following him or her, then they're a celebrity as opposed to an influencer, right? So I do not follow Kim Kardashian, but I have heard of her, mostly against my will, but still. And she definitely qualifies as a celebrity in that context, as opposed to someone maybe lesser known, which definitely would be an influencer.
Okay, wonderful. Now your platform is intriguing and very interesting, and the leader in the field, because you have some type of AI-assisted influencer suggestions on the platform, artificial intelligence that is incorporated into your platform to offer suggestions through the platform. So explain what that's all about and how you develop that. That's very interesting.
Of course. So yeah, it's very exciting stuff. So there's a couple of challenges at hand that cannot be done manually, right? How do you identify literally millions of influencers? How do you know which one performs better than the others? How do you know which ones are relevant for your brand as opposed to someone else's brand, right? And thankfully, this is a world full of data, and there's a lot of patterns that can be identified. And that's mostly what we do, right? We build the technology to identify who's an influencer, who's not an influencer, who's top performing and performing a lot less, for instance, or who's relevant to your brand. And the way we do that is that we indexed a whole lot of data points. Some of them are the variables that are intrinsic to the influencer. Are they based in Arizona versus in France? Are they a man or a woman? Are they in the 18 to 25 year old bracket, right? But there's also everything that relates to their content they produce. How often do they publish? How successful are their posts online, and so on and so forth. After which, there's how about the audience? Who follow these influencers, right? Are they young people, older people? Are they geographically based here or there? Are they male, female? And all of this actually matters, right? But then the biggest area of focus is definitely on the contents, because you can do a lot of text-based analysis on the text or on the caption of a specific post, or image analysis and image recognition, right, on any kind of image post or video post. And this is very exciting because it gives us a whole array of data that we can actually crunch and transform into something very actionable for our clients, so they can make informed decisions. And it's no longer a shot in the dark when it comes to working with influencers.
See, I love that. So your system and your technology can decipher data points from both text and photos, which is really, really amazing. And I would imagine for Instagram and because photos and videos are driving much of the traffic now, that's a very important concept that Upfluence is able to do for your clients. If I'm a CMO or a chief marketing officer at a very large company and I want to engage with Upfluence, is there a process of onboarding, or is it all done automatically? Do I speak with someone at Upfluence, or do I come online and do it all myself?
So, fantastic question. So this is mostly automatic. So what we do is we sell the tool to the client so they can do influencer marketing themselves. That being said, the tools are complex, right? There's a lot of variables at play and the features are quite advanced. And as a result, we have a customer success management, manager, a CSM, that's going to walk you through, you, the CMO, and everyone in your team, how to properly use the tool to define some milestones, some success milestones, some objectives, and make a plan how to achieve them, and then check back on these milestones on a quarterly basis, right, during quarterly business reviews. So this is how we marry the best of both worlds, the technology and this, the basically self-service, as well as the human factor and the expertise that we can bring to the picture as well.
See, I really like that. So it's a platform that a CMO can go on with his or her team, use the platform, but then Upfluence on the other side also gives a success manager to make sure that the two sides combine in a very powerful, positive, and exciting way. That makes a lot of sense. Let's pull the lens back a little bit further now, Vivien, with Upfluence, because if someone is an influencer on Instagram, and someone comes to the Upfluence platform and wants to engage with that influencer or get their product or service promoted through that influencer, what's the exchange of the financial benefits for everyone involved? If you could go into that a little bit.
Yeah, fantastic question. So it all comes down to what we call the value proposition. Right? If I'm a brand, what am I going to offer you, Andy, so that a deal is interesting enough for you to work, but also sufficiently cost efficient for me as a brand to remain positive in terms of return on investment, right? And there's a little bit of a spectrum, right? If I were to say, Andy, I'm going to offer you $1 million for an Instagram post, most likely you're going to say yes, right? And all the other people I reach out to are going to say yes. On the other hand, I'm going to guess the worst possible ROI of the history of mankind, which is not exactly as a brand what I'm looking for. On the other hand, if I reach out to you saying, hey, Andy, I would like you to work for free for me, please, in whole likelihood, you are going to say no, and maybe some of your peers will say yes, but it's going to be a very low success rate. In that sense, I have a fantastic ROI because I pay nothing and I get something in return. That being said, my ability to activate influencers is very low, right? Because my value proposition to you is not at all enticing. So the key is really to find the middle ground and somewhere in between that can satisfy both. It's not necessarily easy. In some ways, to approach this, it's either on a monetary basis. If I offer you $100, it costs me $100. This is a one-to-one relationship. That being said, there are other different kind of value propositions that we can have. I can send you a $100 product, which costs me maybe $25 to produce, $5 to ship, and then have some leverage, right? Because the perceived value is around $100. The monetary value is a little bit less in that sense, right? And there are plenty of other ways you can work. Something that's really gaining momentum and gaining traction at the moment is revenue sharing. I will say, hey, Andy, for every customers you bring through the door, I will give you 10% of the gross merchandise value, or $10 or whatever the agreement is, right? And also it can be a mix of different variables. But yeah, it's healthy to have some incentive because I think that's the best way to align the objectives of the brand and the influencers so they can do the best possible work and the best possible fruitful relationship together.
See, I love that. And Upfluence has been able to put that together in a very powerful way. For influencers watching the show, do they have to come into Upfluence and sign up with you sort of as a marketplace where there's a side for the influencers to come in? And if that's so, how does all that work?
So, great question. They can, but they don't have to. What I mean by that is we do have a creator portal on which the creators can sign up with their social media accounts. They can volunteer some of their data to the clients that we work with, to the brands that we work with. It's good for them because they make sure of the accuracy of information. They can input some variables, how much they want to get paid and things of that nature. That being said, we also have a way to gather information about influencers that are not necessarily signed up. In that case, the advertisers or the brands or the agencies will reach out to the influencers directly, right, to offer them business in their own name. They do that through our system, but it's in their own name and at their own initiative. So if they do that, it's work for them. So that means they are already invested in a relationship, and it's not some hit and run, just wanted to have a rate card and I'm going to move on to the next influencers, right? They are serious enough to engage with the influencers in that scenario.
See, that makes a lot of sense. So the influencers themselves can sign up on your portal or on your platform, on your technology platform at Upfluence. And the people that want the influencers can reach out through the platform directly using their brand as sort of the discussion point with the particular influencers right now. And I love what you've done with that platform because it gives a broad array of options in a meaningful way, depending on where your clients want to take it. And I really like that very, very much. That's very, very smart. When we talk about influencers, Vivien, we talk sometimes, unfortunately, about, let's just say, fake followers. And I know that you're one of the leaders in your technology, has a leading position on figuring out who is the real influencer and who is less than real. So let's talk about that for a minute.
100%. So to zoom out a tiny bit, I think with any new emerging marketing channel, it's true in a lot of different verticals, but it's very true in marketing. There's always a little bit of a cat and mouse between the market and the regulation, right? And regulation has been doing a lot of things to keep up. The FTC has implemented some disclosing rules to make sure that influencers mention when a post is a sponsored post, for example. Here in Europe, there's the GDPR that's doing a lot to protect the personal data of individuals and influencers. Same with the CFAA in the US and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of regulation coming that is going to tackle some of it. But that being said, there's still some people that are one step ahead of regulation, right? And that takes shape in a couple of things. What we've seen is either some click farms or some robots that will emulate human behavior to either create fake followers, fake engagements, and so on and so forth. And that's very a short-term game for influencers that might be seduced by the idea of, I'm going to buy 10,000 followers for $30 and inflate my numbers a little bit. I will be more appealing to brands and I'm going to get more partnerships like this. But it's very nearsighted in the sense that it's very easy to determine whether or not a follower is a true or false follower. The way our technology works on this is that we've identified a number of behaviors that we judge suspicious, right? I'm just going to give you a couple to exemplify that. But for instance, if your 5-year-old social media profile, you still have an egg as a profile picture and you only follow people that follow each other, that looks like a cluster, a pod, that's a little bit suspicious, right? And there's about 20 of these behaviors that we rank. So we determine the suspiciousness score, and we'll say, okay, that follower 80% sure it's a fake follower. And as a result, we'll be able to do that for followers, for the engagement as well, because we can have fake likes, fake comments, and things of that nature. And so we factor that into the data that we have about an influencer. And thanks to that, our clients can make informed decisions saying, okay, I want people who generate that level of real engagement, true engagement, or I want to remove from any potential partnership people who have more than X fake followers and things of that nature.
See, I love that, and your system does that, and that's why Upfluence is one of the leading platforms in this entire industry. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
When we think about brands, Vivien, and we think about the different social networks, are there certain types of brands that work better on a certain social network? And if that is the case, does Upfluence help with that decision-making capacity?
So another great question. So in general, influencer marketing works best with consumer-facing kind of organizations, right? B2C, business to consumer. There is some success with B2B influencer marketing, but it's mostly on different channels, mostly LinkedIn or blogs and things of that nature. And there's a couple of very specific caveats that I'm going to set aside to answer that question. In the B2C world, it's true that there are some products that are absolutely made for very short form ephemeral kind of content, right? When you think maybe beauty products or skincare products, these kind of things are great for Instagram, for TikTok, and things of that nature. Now, what we've seen is that products are a little bit more technical, a little bit more complicated. They are best expressed through longer form content, and you can see that with YouTube, for example, where longer form videos are really taking the cake, or blog post. A blog sounds like a thing of the past, but it's still very strong. To have a proper article that will describe in 1,000 words the new tech gadget or the new computer that came out. That's a great way for influencers to express their expertise that they might have about one topic, right? So I will say from a scale of a product complexity, the less complex your product, the more you can go into Instagram post, feed post, or stories. The more complex, the more you can go in a longer form kind of content format.
See, that's a great generalized viewpoint with regard to a product for the B2C category. And obviously, video is one of the most powerful things that are out there right now on social. Mm-hmm. And I know that in your system at Upfluence, when your customers come to you, they probably have in mind how they're going to try and influence the influencers' followers. So does your customer service experts or your customer success experts, do they share with your clients the type of format that they feel will be the best format to influence the influencers' followers?
So absolutely, there's two sides to the answer. Number one, when we first onboard the client, we will, as I mentioned, define some success milestones, and usually we sort of work backwards from these milestones, and we reverse engineer. Okay, how do we achieve the thing that the client wants, right? And that comes with a little bit of strategy session where we'll spitball and we'll say, okay, based on what you want to achieve, based on the kind of product you are, we believe the best kind of campaigns would be XYZ, and the best kind of social networks to be active on would be XYZ, right? So that's definitely something that happens very early in a relationship. The other thing that happens is that you touch base on AI and machine learning, which is something we're very active on. Thanks to that and the very large volume of clients that we have and users of the platform that we have, we're able to identify some very strong best practices in the industry. And very regularly, we're going to be able to check in with a client saying, hey, we've determined that the best way to do X is this, right? And so we're going to give them pointers on a more practical scale, less strategic, more operational, but that has a lot of value for them because they can improve their unit economics and can improve the outputs of their influencer marketing activations as a result.
See, I love that. And that's, again, one of the reasons why Upfluence is the leader. If I have a Fortune 500 company or an Inc. 5000 company in, let's just say, America, and I speak English, and my company is all kind of positioned to the English-speaking customer. But I say to myself, I'd like to start selling my product in France, for example. But I don't really know much about the French language. How does all that work with Upfluence, in terms of sort of the differences of languages that people speak, and perhaps the differences of languages that influencers and your clients speak?
So another great question. So to begin with, we're a very international company. We're an American company incorporated in the USA, but founded by French people, because nobody's perfect, and as I'm sure you can hear. So this international strand of DNA is very strong with us. Our customer success team that we've touched base on speaks a number of languages, English, French, of course, but also Spanish, Portuguese, Chinese. So that's something that resonates a lot with us. So that's item number one. Item number two is, for that specific scenario, the platform will enable you to do a couple of things. Number one, to identify influencers that speak French or are geolocated in France, or whose audience is somewhat French. And those are three things that achieve different results, right? Because you can either try to tick all three of the boxes, meaning French influencers that publish content in French and who's followed by French people. But you can also, if you are only testing the market, you can also go for different strategies, meaning I know exactly how to onboard an influencer in English. I'm going to look for English-speaking influencers in France who are followed by French people. That way, it's a great way to test the waters and to see, if the market is receptive to a product with a process that you master and that you know, right? Or you can say, okay, I'm going to venture on Google Translate and get my invitation templates in French and try to create some sort of a relationship with a French influencer that speaks French and see what happens, right? There's a multiplicity of strategies and a multiplicity of options here.
Okay, that's awesome. And your team obviously is multilingual, and you have the ability to help so many different people from so many different countries speaking in their native tongues, which is really amazing. And those would be your customer success experts over at Upfluence. So when we talk about an influencer, I want to peel it back just a little bit more. And that influencer post something about a product. Let's just say they're doing that. Let's pull it back a little bit more and get a little bit more granular here. So when that influencer posts something about a product, is it mandatory now in anywhere in the world for that influencer to disclose that was a paid type of a post, or is that not necessary at this point in time?
So it's necessary in most countries. Most countries are regulated in that sense. The FTC in the US, the consummation code in France, and there's most major nations and Western countries have. Some countries haven't. That being said, our recommendation to a client is to be as transparent as possible and to demand of the influencers to do this. Number one, it's one way to cover themselves from a legal standpoint if the regulation was to change, but also it's always better, in our opinion, to be transparent with the influencers' followers, and it doesn't deteriorate the metrics as much as one could suspect, right? It has actually a marginal impact. And some influencers who do this very well and do this very often, we measure two things: the performance of what we call organic post, meaning post, everyday posts that do not necessarily mention a brand, and then sponsored posts. And the best influencers manage to outperform with their sponsored posts, their organic posts, because they manage to appropriate the message of a brand so well in a way that resonates so much with their followers that it actually outperforms the rest, right? So that's something we really recommend as a general rule. That's built into the software so that it doesn't slip through the crack. It's not just a matter of someone's honesty. It's probably not as scary as it is.
See, I would imagine, Vivien, that as an influencer, one would have to be very careful with regard to what they put and what they post out on their social media, because if they have a good following of people and all of a sudden they start posting some things that don't resonate with those people, then I would imagine that is causing their influence sort of rating to go down with the people that are following them. Is that correct?
That's exactly right. And that's also something we measured, and basically measuring the volume of sponsored posts as opposed to the engagement. And what we see that the relationship between the two asymptotes towards zero very quickly, as one can imagine. And so there's some sort of a sweet spot where you can go up to 7% of your content that can be sponsored, 1 in 15 roughly. After that, it will start to diminish, and the returns are going to diminish and to hurt technically your metrics, right? And so your appeal to brands. So it's very important for influencers to sort of resist the urge of making a quick buck, and to accept that extra collaboration. If it's not something that doesn't exactly echo with what they do, it's better actually to pass on that one, not to hurt your metrics moving forward.
See, I love that, because that's something that anyone can get their arms around. That 1 in 15 number is a very good baseline for influencers watching the show to start thinking about. And with your system, what I love is what you're telling me is that your AI assisted influencer platform gives your customers an ability to know what's happening with the influencer themselves, and it'll give them some feedback about what's happening with their sponsored posts real time, I would imagine. Let's talk about that a little bit. Yeah. You offer real-time analysis. How does that work within the Upfluence platform?
Yeah, absolutely. So, tiny bit of context. Everything changes overnight in this crazy world of ours, right? And so influencers are in a very good spot, their situation can change dramatically virtually overnight. So it's been very important in the way we've built this technology to build time series. So we can see not only a metrics as a static data point, but also as lines, right? How it evolves month over month or week over week. And so a couple of things we measure here is, to begin with, and that's the most obvious one, is the number of followers. Is it increasing, decreasing, right? Or can you spot maybe a very sharp increase or decrease? So maybe that influencer has purchased fake followers, or to echo back on one of the points we discussed. And that's already very helpful to determine, that influencer is a rising star. So it might not be as expensive as it should be. That's an opportunity for me as a brand. Or alternatively, okay, that influencer is losing momentum. Maybe is not the way, maybe I should allocate my budget differently as a brand, right? So that's item number one. The other one is the engagement rate. We know that the larger the community that an influencer has, the harder it is to sustain a very high level of engagement. So we try to measure that as well, saying, okay, that growth of followers that we have, how does it impact positively or negatively the engagement rate, so the ability of influencer to generate like, comments, shares, and so on and so forth. So that's the second thing. Third thing is, what brands has this influencer worked with, how many times, and what was the effectiveness? So does this post with this brand outperform, or underperform compared to the rest? And that's actually very interesting for brands, because you can have a couple of strategies as a brand. A follower strategy, there's this very big well-known brand that does it this way, I'm going to do exactly the same. So I'm going to have a follower strategy, as opposed to, okay, I'm going to do the opposite of what they do. And so I don't want to be exposed to any influencer who has mentioned that brand in the last 6 months, right? So depending on what your objectives are, you are going to be able to use that, those time series and the dynamic data to make the right decisions.
Okay. And in terms of, and that makes all the sense in the world. And again, that's why
Right.
People who are looking to get connected with influencers, and influencers that are wanting to get connected to potential advertisers, I guess we would call them. That's why there's such an influx of people coming to Upfluence, which is really the worldwide leader in influencer platforming and AI technology to get what you want out of your system. Vivien, let's talk about the social networks. Now, I know you don't want to give one favorite over the other, but let's rank them, if you will, from your perspective in terms of the influencer power metric. Which ones right now are really knocking the covers off the ball? And maybe we can rate those or rate those for our customers.
Yeah, of course.
Or for our viewers, pardon me.
Yeah. So obviously, it would depend from client to client. What kind of product do they sell? How do they sell it? What their strategy? What's their catchment area, and so on and so forth. But to play the game, I'm going to give a rank. So it's been true for the last few years, and it's still true to this day. The number one place for influencer marketing is Instagram. It's really a powerhouse. They have a variety of content format. They have over 1 billion active users. So they're huge. They're still growing, though lower than others. But and they keep innovating, adding live content, IGTV, reels, and so on and so forth. So that stays the number one in my mind. Number two would have been YouTube up to recently, and now I have to say TikTok, who has been the highest growing social network ever. Formerly Musically, purchased by the company ByteDance in China, rebranded as TikTok, and super successful. A younger audience, a more Gen Z to a degree, more oriented entertainment-like. There's a lot of dancing, music, and very entertaining content, as opposed to more maybe for show on Instagram or educational on YouTube. So a very different kind of stuff as well, but fast growing. And what's interesting with fast growing social networks is that there is a time where the law of offer and demand hasn't settled quite yet, meaning there's a huge influx of users, which means the audience is absolutely incredible. And brands tend to be late to the party, right? Because change management is only human, so it's very hard. And so brands tend to be late to the party. So there is a time frame, there is a moment in time where for a brand, you have an incredible bargaining power, meaning there are so many users and so many influencers virtually untouched, and only a handful of brands, right? So you can make incredible deals and have incredible value. This tends to correct towards the mean, as brands catch up. But we're still in towards the end of that window of opportunity, and I think that's something that brands and agencies should very much keep in mind. And number three, I'm going to stick to YouTube. Huge audience, very interesting formats as well. And YouTube has had historically a very interesting strategy, which is very unique, which they share the ad revenue with creators, right? And that's something that Instagram doesn't do. That's something that TikTok doesn't do. They have a different strategy, which is to make their influencers very easily findable by brands, so brands can give them the money, but they keep 100% of the ad revenue. YouTube, even though they've tweaked things in the recent past, historically they've been quite generous into sharing some of the ad money with the influencers, which is a great way to make them loyal to the platform and more invested and produce more content and so on and so forth.
Wow. Vivien, when people come on Upfluence and they're working with your advisors, your success team, what percent of those three networks, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, are people using? In other words, do they split up their influencer marketing 33% to YouTube, 33% to TikTok, and 33% to Instagram? Or it depends on the product? And do you recommend going all in with one of the social networks or spreading it through the three?
So I'll let to unpack here, but I love the question. In general, I would recommend, I'm going to say conflicting things, but there are scenarios in which I would recommend going all in. If you have great unit economics, you know exactly how much it costs you to acquire one client through influencer marketing, go all in and keep scaling that channel. This is how you will yield the most returns as a brand, right? So that's one scenario. The other scenario is you're only getting started with influencer marketing, so you don't know your unit economics that well, or you're maybe an agency and you want to have a very wide variety of offer, or you're more looking for awareness as opposed to conversions. In that case, it's good to put your eggs in different baskets, right? And appeal to the creativity of more people across a wider variety of social networks. And now there's a scenario in between, which is influencers don't usually exist in a vacuum, right? It's true that they're usually stronger in one social networks, but they tend to be available on a variety of social networks. So even if, let's say, you and D are very prominent Instagram influencers, chances are you also have a TikTok account or Twitter account and so on and so forth. And as a brand, if, let's say, in that hypothetical scenario, I'm the brand, I would be that would be interesting to ask you to share your content not only in Instagram, which is your flagship social networks, but also in the others, right? To share the content, to repurpose the content to your other social networks. And as a result, by running what could look like an exclusively Instagram campaign, I would be actually collecting the benefits of sharing content on other networks as well, right? And so that's one way to sort of do best of both worlds.
Wow. So if I want to pull it back a little bit, because for some people watching, they might not really understand what this is all about, because like you said, they're lagging a little bit behind what's really happening out there. So if I want to influence people with my product, and I go through Upfluence to reach out to influencers throughout the world, and I use the system, do I need to have creative done, or are the influencers the ones that are building the creative for the client through Upfluence?
So the latter. And another great question, that's the beauty of it, is that you surrender the creative to the influencer, which can be actually scary, right? And for a lot of older school marketing kind of guys, historically, marketing has been about controlling the message, right? And controlling it from A to Z. If you purchase a billboard in the street, if you purchase a TV ad, it's the brand that owns the message, and they are going to be able to control the entirety of it. And now for the first time, it's indirect marketing, right? So they market to their consumers via the proxy of influencers. And by doing so, they surrender the control to the influencer. And that's actually a good thing because the influencer, for obvious reasons, knows their audience a lot better than you do as a brand. And so they can actually reappropriate the message in a way that would be very creative, very different, something that you've never said, and that will echo very differently with the audience. And so sometimes it's even okay to accept that the influencer will say something negative about your product, right? Some brands are like, why would I pay someone to say, 90% positive, 10% positive? Well, that adds a lot of credibility to a review and so on and so forth. So that's, again, we talked about fraud and authenticity. And I believe this kind of authentic content and to surrendering the creative and the narrative to the influencer is actually a very good idea. And that's how you can really crowdsource and get tons of idea and co-create and so on and so forth. So there's a ton of benefits to doing just that.
Okay, let's bring it back even further now, Vivien, because This is amazing. We have somebody watching the show. Let's say that they own a hardware store. They sell tools and they sell outdoor furniture and they sell pottery and planting supplies and gardening supplies. They have a hardware store. And they want to drive people into their store. So is it possible to, let's say, go granular on this, use Upfluence and say, I only want influencers that are influencing, let's say, within 40 square miles of my store. And then I only want to use the influencers that really have people that are following that are talking about gardening, for example, or maybe home improvement or house flipping, something like that, so that you can really get granular on it, so you can use these influencers to drive people into your store. Is that something that would be possible?
So absolutely, web to store strategies have been the thing for a while. A little bit less now for obvious reasons. We're still in the age of COVID, but this is absolutely right. And there's two sides to that coin. Number one is where the influencers themselves as people are based, and we can geolocate to a fairly accurate degree influencers and say, okay, I'm looking for influencers who are within a 50-mile radius of that postcode, so that if I invite them to my store to do a review or something like that, I'm not going to have to fly them in and to deteriorate my marketing dollars, right? So that's item number one. Item number two, we're talking about the audience analytics at the very beginning of this interview, meaning where are they geolocated? I mentioned countries, but this is true to a more granular way to also say, okay, I want people, I want influencers followed by New Yorkers at least 10% plus, right? And that's one way that can be done. Now, for something hyper-specific, meaning I'm looking only for people who can drive foot traffic into my store in Arizona, you are going to have some loss into the efficiency of your marketing dollar spent, right? Because even if an influencer is very geolocated, a fair percentage of his audience is going to be elsewhere and maybe not in the catchment area of your hardware store in that scenario. So there will be some loss, but if you're, let's say, a chain that you have a couple of locations or a few locations across country, that can be actually a very smart way to multiply some local activations, have influencers come to your store, produce, again, super authentic, super good-looking content that comes from the heart, that's on premises, that's true and not altered by whatever message I, the brand, want to put in their mouth. That's actually a pretty smart way to drive foot traffic.
That's amazing, Vivien. I love that idea. Is there any hard and fast rule or generalized rule that's not hard and fast with regard to a company about what % of their overall marketing budget should be used on influencer marketing versus some other types of marketing that are available at this point in time?
It's really hard to tell. I think we're in the age, especially in the age of COVID again, where a lot of offline marketing dollars are moving to online. And one of the benefits to that is a lot of it is trackable to a very high degree of accuracy. So you can know how much it moves my top line and, how much, how profitable is this marketing channel to a degree. So instead of, having an out-of-the-box answer saying it should be 15% exactly and nothing less, what I would say is play by ear. Compare your unit economics, see how much it costs for you to acquire a client through influencer marketing as opposed to SEO, as opposed to search engine optimization, to search engine advertising, or whatever other channels that you have, and see what's the trend, right? Are my unit economics improving, deteriorating? Why? And then, compare and tweak your spending as a result, right? I think that's the best way to really stretch your marketing dollars and to make the most out of your budget and to really drive growth for your business.
Wow, that's great. That is really, really great advice. Now, Vivien, part of the show today, we want to talk about entrepreneurship in general, and I want to thank you for spending a little bit more time than what we allotted today. I know you're very busy, but I've been wanting to get you on the show for a long time. So I had a lot of questions about Upfluence and an influencer platform program. So you always weren't the co-founder and co-CEO of this New York-based startup. You have a very interesting story, an entrepreneur story. About sleepless nights selling neckties, I believe.
Jesus.
And for our entrepreneurs watching the show, even the younger ones watching the show, or the people that are thinking about building a startup, they're watching you and they're saying, wow, this guy, has always, been at the forefront of his profession and has always been the leader in his field. And he's always been the co-founder and co-CEO of this amazing venture-backed company, Upfluence. But we know that people, to get to where they're going, sometimes scrape their knees a little bit and they have learning experiences. So maybe for the younger entrepreneurs watching the show, you can share a little bit about your story and give them some words of encouragement when things maybe don't look as good as they wanted them to look.
Absolutely. So scraping my knees 100%. So I think to the day almost, it's been 10 years that I've been out of college. I went to business school here in France, at the end of which I found a cool job in a startup. It was a marketing job. I was in charge of email marketing for a company that grew from about 10 people to 45 people. So I was lucky enough to work directly with founders, and their entrepreneurial drive was very contagious. So I thought, all right, I'm going to start a business as well. So this was back in 2011. 2011, all the rage was about e-commerce for different reasons decision than today, but I thought, all right, on the side of my day job, I'm going to get with a friend, my friend Kevin, and we're going to start an e-commerce company. And so we tried to be very rational about what kind of product to sell, right? So we had about zero expertise in anything. So, we might as well start from scratch. So we thought, all right, let's find a product that has high enough profit margins, that does not require too much expertise. And we went into textile, and we thought, all right, the sizes, it's complicated, that creates a lot of inventory. So let's find one product that doesn't have sizes. Neckties. Okay, let's go. What the story doesn't tell is that we did very little market research, and we probably should have done a little market research, because no one wears tie. I think the both of us are a pretty good example of that right now. But case in point, we found that very cool artisan in southern Italy that did very beautiful silk neckties, and we got 1,000 delivered in a huge box that was taking half my living room in my apartment. And we thought, right, we're going to sell these ties. It's going to be easy. We work for web companies, tech companies, so we're going to have a lot of quick success. And turns out that we launched a website and we had zero sales. And as we started to scratch our heads and look into what happened, it turns out that we're not the first ones, and there were tons of small websites selling the exact same thing we were selling at the exact same price we were selling. And that was problematic because the market was very fragmented and we're all selling online, and online advertising is oftentimes bid-based, meaning the higher the demand, the higher the conversion of price, the cost of client acquisition is going to be super high. And so we're in this situation where we could not break even on acquiring clients. And so I had 990 ties sitting in my living room, and we thought, all right, we're slowly but surely running out of cash. That's when we thought, okay, let's try to be decent entrepreneurs and find other ways to sell these. So we tried to come up with ideas, most of which failed spectacularly. We tried wholesale. We tried a number of things that didn't work. But one thing that did work was to reach out to bloggers. It was before Instagram was very big. Reach out to bloggers saying, hey, can you please write a review about this tie? They would write the review after an unlimited amount of follow-ups. And the review would generate traffic on the website. Traffic would turn into clients, and clients would actually be satisfied clients that would come back, and so on and so forth. So that's how we got rid of the ties. But that was an extremely time-consuming process. Again, I had a day job, so this was literally my nights spent finding on Google bloggers, getting their address, reaching out to them, following up a million times, and so on and so forth. And on top of which, we ended up doing a few mistakes, meaning offering a product and some money to an influencer, to a blogger, that would drive zero conversions, right? And so that's when we had the haha moment, thinking, okay, this works. Influencer marketing works, because that's how we sold all of our ties. And so most B2C companies should benefit from this. That being said, it's a very time-consuming process, number one, and number two, it's a very opaque process, because we need data to actually make a smart decision as opposed to a shot in the dark. So that's when we thought, wouldn't it be nice to have some sort of a technology platform to do that for us and to take the work out of this, and that's how Upfluence was born.
That is a great story. That's a wonderful entrepreneur story.
Thank you.
About something that happened that did not go the way that you planned, but you figured out a way to make lemonade out of lemons, and a wonderful seed was put into the ground that started to become a nice small tree that was built straight up, and then it just blossomed into a big giant oak tree with Upfluence. So that's amazing. Vivien, I know that time is very valuable for you, and I wanted to thank you with our time zone differences to coming on the show today. I was so delighted to be able to ask the questions that I had, because they've been burning in my mind for a few weeks getting ready for this very, very important interview. And I just wanted to thank you and congratulate you for your success at Upfluence, and tell you that it's been a real delight to have you on the show.
Likewise. Thank you so much, Andy. Those were great questions. You definitely did your research, and I appreciate that a lot. And thanks for having me. That was a pleasure to talk.